Heading off today, Liz?
Yep, Roper. Get up there this afternoon, I reckon.
If it doesn't rain.
I guess the preparation for a trip is half the excitement. And in this case, it's doubly important because this trip, I'm about to go right up the Carpentaria coastline and cut across over to Catherine. Now, my job takes me all over Northern Australia and I see a lot of the country. But I reckon this trip, this part, has got to be one of the most exciting trips you can do in Australia.
Out here, you're on your own. You can drive for days without seeing anyone else. Believe it or not, I'm a major in the Australian Army, and I reckon I've got one of the best jobs in the place. Moving right across the top half of Australia, learning how to survive up here, and discovering some of the secrets of bush tucker.
I guess I spend about 8 months a year chasing up bush tucker all over Northern Australia. And the idea is, of course, that the Department of Defence, and particularly the Army, have got an interest in this sort of thing. Because if ever we have soldiers out in the paddock, they may need to know it. I get the information by visiting Aboriginal people and Aboriginal communities. And they feed back that local information that I don't have.
And in this sort of country, you need all the help you can get. This trip's going to take me right into the remote heart of Aboriginal territory, Arnhem land, crossing the Roper River, heading north to the Coolaton, and then out west to the Bullman Gorge. It's a real relief to arrive at the Roper River, a great place at the end of a long, dusty drive across from the Gulf. It's a perfect spot to take a break and knock up a bit of tucker.
What I'm looking for here are the little freshwater mussels. You always find them tucked away underneath these reeds in running water like this. Having said that, you probably won't be able to find one. Here, there we go. Here's one there. Oop, two. There you go. You can cook them up and boil them up and eat them. When you're poking around waterways like this, you've just got to be careful of crocodiles because they come sneaking up on you. I reckon the best trick is to get what you want and then clear out.
The waterways up here are a terrific source of food. At different times of the year, there's barramundi and salmon and bream. There's also turtle and ducks and geese. So there's plenty to keep the crocs well fed. And a bit left over for me too.
put this pot in here a couple of hours ago. And what I'm looking for is a thing called K-Racks. And there they are. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. They're a little freshwater prawn or shrimp. Not bad tucker either. You can get them all through these waterways right the way around Arnhem Land. In fact, they're all over Northern Australia when you look at it. Those little fellas, you can boil them up. They're not real little either. You can boil them up. They make a good feed for breakfast. Just put that back in there. All you got to do is bait it up with a dirty old bit of fish or something like that. And they crawl around the bottom, come into the net, and you got them. Just like a prawn, aren't they? Except they've got these two little blue feelers out the front. The other pots. This river has got a couple of real characteristics to it. Firstly, it's the southern border of Arnhem Land, and secondly, it provides a top feed. Tremendous stuff. Really great. Most Australians don't get across the other side. They can't get into Arnhem Land. It's a very remote and very special part of Australia. To get in there, you've got to have one of these permits, like that. Once I cross over there, I'm leaving my civilization behind. Arnhem Land is as close as you'll get to Aboriginal tradition. As recently as 50 years ago, these people lived entirely off this land. They had a balanced diet of hundreds of fruits, nuts and vegetables, as well as meat and fish. They don't rely on bush tucker anymore, but their botanical knowledge is still very detailed. And the way they gather their food can often be totally unexpected.
Cut in this part. What's that? What? You're big now.
Hanging up that up too, eh? What's happening here is we've collected all this bark here off a particular tree. It's called the emu apple tree. The bark contains a sap in it. In other words, it's a bit like soap. And if you pound it up and release that sap and then drag it through the water, a billabong, it stuns all the fish in the billabong. You can collect them up and then cook them up and eat them. They call it a fish poison, but it's not really a poison because what it does is pollute the water, cuts down the oxygen content within the water, and the fish, because they can't breathe anymore, become unconscious and float belly up on the surface. Get you? Is it? No. Rubbish. Rubbish. Getting bush tucker is never easy. It's hard and dedicated work. But it's also efficient, and it's got to be. It's one of the first things I learnt from Aboriginals. When you're trying to survive, it's critical to use your time and your energy in the most effective way. I could muck around all day here with a hook and a line and go home hungry. This way, you can be sure of a decent feed. Once the bark's been pounded up, the best part of the job is spreading it round the waterhole. So in the midday heat, you can cool off for half an hour or so and just wait for the results.
Well done. Woo!
There you go. That's fishing Arnhem style.
Aboriginal people have taught me a lot. They've been pretty generous with their knowledge, and I'm grateful for that. Because I can now see the bush and its full potential in a very different way. There are so many little things that can add up to survival.
You know, it's really amazing that no matter where you find yourself out in the bush, you can always find something that'll help you survive. That's tremendous. Those leaves, those flowers there, they're loaded with pollen. When you dunk them in your brew, they sweeten it up for you. In fact, they're off the melaleuca, the paper bark. And the bark off that tree can help you to start your fire, the tinder it is. And if you're out of tea, well, you can get the leaves themselves, crush them up, boil them up, and they're a bit of a tea substitute. Not much of one, but still they'll do the job. That's where it got its common name from in the first place, tea tree. There was a bloke came through here years ago, Leichhardt, travelled further up the creek that way, and went right through up into Port Essendon. And he used the countryside all the way along his journey, little tricks like this, and got him all the way through up there. Trouble is, a few years later, he went out in the desert country and no one's seen him ever since.
Even today, for most Australians, this can still seem like a hostile place. From here on, I'm on my own on this trip, and travelling through this country is a challenge at the best of times. Dirt roads turn into tracks, and many of them don't appear on the maps. So one false turn can land you in trouble. You certainly wouldn't want to break down out here. I'm now a day's drive into Arnhem Land and heading northeast to the coast to a place called Waygiver. If you do find yourself in trouble out here, there are three things you've got to start looking for: food, water and shelter. And Aboriginal people have always known that the most important was fresh water.
This is exactly the country I'm looking for, because those casuarinas there indicate to me somewhere under the sand here we've got to have a bit of fresh water. Back there behind the sand dunes there's a big water table which comes seeping down underground, emptying itself out into the ocean. There, here it is. And if my hunch is right, this should be fresh water. Just try him out. A bit muddy there for a minute. I'll just let him settle for a second. Yep, that's it. You get gallons and gallons of it coming down here. This whole beachfront area here has got this stuff pouring out into the ocean here. You get these casuarinas all the way around the Australian coastline. And they don't always indicate that there is water underground like this. Sometimes you might just get little bits. But around this part of the world, it's a pretty sure sign that you've got a good supply of fresh water. Be enough to keep me going for a bit.
I have to keep pushing further north before the start of the wet season. It's another 10 hours drive to the Walker and then the Coolatong River, where I can set up camp and get some work done before the rains set in.
Of course, when you're doing an overnight camp, it's nice to do it near a bit of water like that. Can't always do it, but when you can get yourself a bit of water, you grab it. I keep my camps pretty simple. Just a swag, which is nothing more than a bit of canvas and a couple of sheets and a couple of blankets. Maybe a chair, one of these things here, which are commonly referred to in the army as chairs millionaire, because when you sit down in them, you feel like a bit of a millionaire at the end of a hard day. And the only other bit of luxury I've got is a mosquito net. And I'll tell you what, in some places up here you need it. Of course, it's not always the mosquitoes that are the main problem around the area. Around this part of the world as well, you've also got buffalo. And if they come tromping through your camp in the middle of the night, they can give you a bit of a nasty surprise. There we go. When you set up your camp, you should always make sure there's no ants around the place too, because that can be a bit of a problem in the middle of the night, particularly if it's raining, because they tend to come around and crawl on top of your bed and roost up with you for the night. I think I'll put my fire over there, out of the wind a bit, so the smoke doesn't blow through my camp.
It's my job to catalogue and analyse all the bush tucker resources around these areas. And there's still an awful lot that we don't know about. Of the countless Australian bush foods, only one, the macadamia nut, has been produced commercially. Our diet today basically comes from the plants and animals that have been brought into the country, then bred and cultivated up to finally produce the food you find in the supermarket. Meanwhile, we've been ignoring some pretty fascinating things out here, right under our noses. When we've analysed bush foods, we've often found that they're richer in vitamins, trace elements and proteins than the food we're eating at home. For example, the billigate plum, which is found up here during the winter months, is the richest known source of vitamin C in the world. But you do have to be careful, because many Australian plants contain toxins. They can even be deadly. That's why I'm doing this work. In the future, army maps of these areas will include photographs and information about local bush tucker. So anyone who's caught in this country should have a better chance of survival. And all of us will know a bit more about what's out here.
just send one of these into the laboratory and get a nutritional analysis done of him. It's really very amazing when you walk around the scrub country, the bush like this, just what a range of bush tucker you can find. In about an hour, I picked this lot up here. And within this area here, we've got a whole variety. We've got these little figs here that you can eat, as well as these cocky apples. They're called cocky apples because the cockatoos love eating them. We've also got these little hibiscus flowers, which you can peel the petals off and eat. Send that off too, but don't eat it. As well as that, we've got a thing here that's really related to a mango. It's called Buchanania obovata. And these little fruit are popping out now because the wet season's about to break. And they're about to turn brown and then black, and they're superb. They're absolutely sweet and nourishing. And this fella here, this is a little vine that scrambles and climbs all over the countryside with these little tendrils here. And you cut off the terminal bud and boil him up just like a spinach. So there is food here, and you can survive, but you've got to know what you're doing.
What I've seen so far on this trip is just a fraction of the bush tucker that's available across northern Australia. As the seasons change, they bring with them a whole new variety of foods. And it's the same with each new bit of country. I'm about as far north as I can get, and it's time to head west, right across the middle of Arnhem land. Most Australians will never get to this part of the world, let alone have to worry about surviving out here. But I still think it's important for all of us to have an understanding of it. The early explorers looked at this land with European eyes. They looked for things that they were familiar with, things that weren't here. This country doesn't release its secrets very easily, and we're just starting to scratch the surface. And one of the great things about it is that it keeps on throwing up surprises at you.
This is really very hard to cop. This is a place called Emu Springs, and it's right in the centre of Arnhem Land, and from here on, I'm on my way out. It's a superb little oasis, quite contrasting to the rest of the countryside. Right here, it's safe from crocodiles, but downstream a bit, the crocodiles do live down there. In the middle of the day, I can't find a better spot to spend half an hour. You can even get yourself a bit of bush tucker around here as well. This is the thing called the Leichhardt fruit, and it comes off this Leichhardt tree. Inside, you've got this little pulp when he fills out and gets ripe, which has got a slightly bitter taste. But it's not bad, and it's good tucker. They used to call this tree once upon a time Nauclei orientalis, but they reckon that was too much of a mouthful, so they changed the botanical name, and they now call it Sarcophilus coordinatus, and that's a great leap forward, that is. This will be ripe in about a month's time. And I reckon if you came back then, you'd get a tremendous feed off this tree. It's named after Leichhardt, who passed all the way through this whole area. And these trees dot the northern part of Australia all the way around the streamlines. They're great stuff. Well, this is it. This is the other border of Arnhem Land. And I've driven all the way through from one side right the way through to the other. Looking at those storm clouds over there, I might have just done it in time because that's the beginning of the wet season. And if you get caught in Arnhem Land in the wet, you're there for keeps. I reckon maybe another half day's drive and I'll be on the bitumen. Might be able to get myself a hot shower at the same time. And that's something that poor old Leichhardt wouldn't have been able to do. But some things about this country and this land just don't change. And the wilderness and the beauty and the attraction of the whole place remain exactly the same. And I reckon that's terrific.